was supposed to be a routine vet visit, a checkup for her beloved dog, Max. When Lisa walked into the small-town veterinary clinic, she expected nothing more than a quick appointment and some friendly advice. But from the moment Dr. Hayes stepped into the room, something felt off. His demeanor was cold, his comments curt. Lisa couldn't shake the sense that his focus wasn't on Max, but on her. As the examination continued, Lisa noticed subtle but unsettling signs. Unnecessary roughness with Max, dismissive remarks about her concerns, and a clear unwillingness to make eye contact. The air grew heavier with each passing moment. She tried to brush it off, but then Dr. Hayes did something that left her frozen in shock. Her instincts kicked in, and she knew she couldn't let this slide. What should have been a simple appointment had turned into a situation that made her heart race. With Max trembling at her side, Lisa made a decision that would set off a chain of events no one in that clinic saw coming. Without hesitation, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. What happened next would change everything and shine a spotlight on a deeper issue that needed to be addressed. Lisa's hands shook as she ended the call, her heart pounding in her chest. The operator had assured her that help was on the way, but now all she could do was wait. She kept her eyes on Max, who was huddled close to her, sensing her unease. The room felt colder somehow, and every second dragged on like an hour. She replayed the moment in her mind, trying to make sense of what she had just seen. Dr. Hayes had always been a trusted figure in their small community, a skilled veterinarian who people often recommended. But today, Lisa saw a side of him that didn't match the reputation. His actions weren't just unprofessional. They seemed deliberate, like there was something more beneath the surface. As she sat there, her thoughts began to drift to past interactions. Had there been signs she missed before? She recalled a story she'd overheard about another pet owner who left the clinic upset, but at the time, it hadn't seemed important. Now it all felt like part of a larger puzzle she couldn't yet piece together. The sound of footsteps brought her back to the moment. Dr. Hayes re-entered the room, his expression unreadable. Lisa braced herself, unsure of what would happen next. Dr. Hayes stood silently in the doorway for a moment, his eyes scanning the room. Lisa couldn't tell if he was aware she had made the call. Her grip tightened on Max's leash, and she forced herself to maintain eye contact. He cleared his throat and stepped closer, his voice measured, but with an edge that made her uneasy. "I need to finish the examination," he said, reaching for Max's collar. Lisa instinctively pulled her dog closer, her voice firm. "I think we're done here. We'll find another vet." She expected him to back off, but instead, he chuckled under his breath, as if amused by her defiance. "Suit yourself," he said, but there was something unsettling in his tone, something that sent chills down her spine. Lisa stood, ready to leave, but as she turned, she noticed a file on the counter with Max's name on it. Scribbled notes in the margins caught her eye. She hesitated, debating whether to say something, but Dr. Hayes quickly moved to close the file and block her view. Outside, the sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the tension in the air. Dr. Hayes' expression faltered for just a second before he composed himself. Lisa knew she wasn't imagining it. He was hiding something. And whatever it was, she wasn't leaving without answers. The sirens grew louder, and Lisa's heart raced as red and blue lights flickered through the window. Dr. Hayes seemed to realize the situation was escalating. His composed demeanor started to crack, and for the first time, Lisa saw unease flash across his face. She stood her ground, gripping Max's leash tightly, silently willing herself to stay calm. "I'll just grab Max's records, and we'll be out of your way," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Dr. Hayes moved to block the counter again, his tone sharp. "There's nothing for you here. The file is incomplete." His attempt to dismiss her only made her more determined. The front door of the clinic creaked open, and Lisa could hear the steady footsteps of approaching officers. Dr. Hayes stepped back, glancing nervously toward the hallway, as if calculating his next move. Lisa took the opportunity to reach for the file, her pulse hammering in her ears. What she saw in those few seconds made her stomach drop. Scribbled notes didn't just mention Max. They listed other pets, strange notations, and details that didn't add up. Before she could process it fully, one of the officers stepped into the room. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his eyes scanning the tense scene. Lisa clutched the file tightly, knowing the truth was just within reach. Lisa turned to the officer, her voice trembling but steady enough to explain. "I don't think everything is all right," she said, holding up the file. "There's something strange here, and I think it needs to be looked into." The officer stepped forward, but before he could respond, Dr. Hayes's voice cut through the air. "That's private information. You have no right to take it." His tone was sharper now, bordering on panic. The officer raised a hand to calm him. "Sir, let's keep this civil. I'll take a look and decide how to proceed." Dr. Hayes hesitated, then reluctantly stepped aside, though his clenched fist told a different story. As the officer scanned the file, Lisa watched his expression shift from neutral to concerned. He glanced at Dr. Hayes. "What are these notes about?" he asked, pointing to a page filled with coded symbols and dates. Dr. Hayes opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, he turned abruptly and bolted down the hallway. Lisa's breath caught as the officer radioed for backup. "Stay here," he instructed, already moving to follow. But curiosity got the better of her. Ignoring his order, Lisa scooped Max into her arms and crept toward the hallway. What she saw at the end made her freeze in place. Dr. Hayes wasn't trying to leave. He was opening a door marked "Staff Only." From behind it, a muffled sound emerged, something that didn't belong in a vet's office. Lisa's mind raced. What could he be hiding back there? Lisa's heart pounded as she watched Dr. Hayes disappear through the door. Ignoring every instinct to turn back, she crept closer, Max trembling in her arms. The muffled noises grew louder, whimpers, faint but unmistakable. Her stomach churned as the truth began to take shape in her mind, but she had to see for herself. The officer reappeared behind her, startling her. "I told you to stay put," he said, but his tone softened when he noticed her fear. Together, they pushed open the staff-only door and stepped inside. What they saw left them both speechless. In a dimly lit room, several cages lined the walls, each holding animals in poor condition, unkept fur, undurfed, and clearly neglected. Stacks of unmarked containers and medical supplies cluttered the space, suggesting procedures that went far beyond routine veterinary care. Lisa's eyes locked on a chart pinned to the wall, listing names, some crossed out, others underlined. Max's name was among them. Dr. Hayes stood in the corner, his back to them, frantically packing items into a duffel bag. When he realized he'd been caught, he turned, his face pale. "You don't understand," he stammered. "It's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. The officer quickly restrained him as Lisa looked around in disbelief. Just when she thought the nightmare was over, her eyes fell on a clipboard with a shocking detail. A business name linked to a larger operation involving illegal animal trade. As backup arrived and Dr. Hayes was led away, Lisa knew this was only the beginning. Exposing him had saved Max and the others, but the story wasn't over. Somewhere out there, others were involved, and Lisa was determined to see it through. As Dr. Hayes was escorted out in handcuffs, Lisa felt a wave of relief wash over her, though her mind was still racing. The officer assured her that the animals in the back room would be taken into care immediately, and that the authorities would launch a full investigation into the illegal operation. Lisa knelt beside Max, gently stroking his fur as she promised him everything would be okay now. In the days that followed, the story unfolded further. News reports revealed that Dr. Hayes had been involved in a network exploiting animals for profit, using his clinic as a front. Thanks to Lisa's courage and quick action, the operation was exposed, and the animals rescued from his clinic were on their way to safe and loving homes. Lisa couldn't shake the thought of how close she had come to losing Max to something so sinister. It was a reminder to always trust her instincts and to never hesitate to speak up when something feels wrong. As she walked Max through the park one sunny afternoon, she watched him wag his tail happily, his ordeal behind him. Lisa smiled, knowing she had done the right thing, not just for Max, but for so many others who couldn't speak for themselves.